So now we have time for questions, comments. The following two sessions are more structured, but now basically the floor is open to any ideas, any suggestions, so whatever you want to say. I think we have this recorded so we can transcribe this. That's right, Chantal? So everything which we'll put on the table will be saved such that we can use it. Who would like to be first to say something? Oh, please. Now, how are we going to do this? Rafat, will you carry the microphone?
It's Rafat. I'm sure I'm from Blue IoT. This is a question to anyone on the floor, and that is, it's time that we start measuring, even if we haven't got the standards yet, and it's actually easy to do, whether it's in workplaces, residences, wherever it may be, we can do this. How long do we have to wait before we can actually start having organisations and residences, public buildings, etc., monitored for air quality, so at least we're getting some data and we can do something about it even before final standards are set? Please, can someone help me answer this question?
I could say a lot about this, but could I put Robin and Greg on the spot? You've done a lot in terms of actually measuring things in Queensland schools. We will be working together on putting this information together, but in general terms, would you like to share with you your experience or work with this?
Yeah, thanks for the question. We have done some measurements within Queensland schools and have got a long way to go, of course. The challenge we found is, whilst we have made some changes around air quality in some learning spaces, as we refer to them, what we really can't measure and what we are challenged with in classroom space is to understand what difference we have made. So your question for me is very relevant. So we may have tried UVC and other things in air ducts, changed air turnover.
Sorry, please speak to the microphone so people online can hear you.
Sorry.
Close to your mouth, the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So whilst we have made some changes, what we really can't measure is the what changes we have made in the air and overall what effect that has had on the health of the people, particularly students and people in their workplace, the teachers and teachers' aides, what change we've made for them. So yes, that is a challenge for us to understand.
Thanks, Greg. Robin wanted to add something? No? No? Okay, all fine. Before we ask for more questions from the room, I can see that there's a question to Liam from Colin. Do you see the question? Would you like Liam to answer it?
I was halfway through typing a response for Colin, but I think it'll be quicker for me to respond. I think it's a really good one. I think often what gets missed in the discussion around indoor air quality is that people think it's about new building designs and significant investment required to sort of retrofit existing buildings, when in fact we know that the introduction of filtration and ventilation can be introduced quite simply. What's really important here is actually the legal obligation that exists in workplaces is for employers to take all reasonably practicable steps. And I think what's really clear about some of the steps that we're asking people to take, in some cases it's as simple as opening up windows, in others it's improving some of the mechanical ventilation that we've got, is that they are all falling within the sort of remit of what's reasonably practicable. So I think unions across the country in lots of different sectors are tackling this in different ways. We heard examples around schools, but indeed I speak to a lot of public sector workers and other workers who are tackling this issue. And the biggest challenge is getting employers to make the investment. And I think obviously we take it from a simple obligation around the right to be healthy and safe at workplaces. But also we know there's significant return on investment in what are some pretty modest investments when it comes to reducing sickness and illness and absenteeism at work. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to work with unions across a range of sectors to really start to dig into workplaces to make sure that we are introducing what are the legal obligations around reasonably practicable steps to reduce risk.
Thank you very much, Liam. I'd like to sort of state for a moment of this term reasonably practicable. This term, which I didn't know before, was introduced by my colleague, Dr. Peter Magari from the University of Queensland, who has done a sort of widespread survey of CO2 concentrations in one of the facilities, educational facilities in Australia. I won't name the facility. Peter is part of Thrive. Now, this concept, reasonably practicable, I asked Peter when I saw first this concept, well, what do you mean reasonably practicable? Because in my language this didn't exist. But then Peter explained that yes, in this policies it is an important term, and thank you, Brian, for bringing this. Peter, did you want to add anything to this?
Well, I just add that before I went to the University of Queensland, I worked for Workplace Health and Safety.
Microphone close to you.
Workplace Health and Safety Queensland for 21 years, so we were the Work Health and Safety regulator, so we regulated the work health and safety legislation, and the term reasonably practical is a fundamental concept across all of the hazards and risks that need to be managed, and indoor air and its quality fits very neatly into those duties under all of the work health and safety statutes across Australia. So we deliberately use the term reasonably practical in the context of the method to evaluate CO2 concentration, because it has to be reasonably practical, it has to be doable, and it has to be based on science and evidence and on health effects. So that's why we use the term, and the term will remain valid, I think, forever under work health and safety legislation. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Peter. But this also puts obligation on, as scientists, that our advice has to be practicable. So that's a very important point. All right, more questions, comments to anyone?
Thank you.
Bronwyn?
Thank you. Question for Ted. As a former Premier of Victoria, you mentioned that next year there'll be, at the very least, there'll be a ministerial shake-up federally, if not a new government. How or what advice do you have for us in terms of best pitching this issue with new people in town? Obviously, a lot of us have done a lot of work trying to find kindred spirits or to uplift awareness amongst existing players. But if they're new, often you want to, do you wait a bit of time, or do you go in straight away and say, here's a great new issue? What's the best way to try to bring the new players along?
It's a great question. And I want to just touch, in answering that question, just touch on some things that Liam said, because in my view, probably the most significant driver of change in indoor air quality is going to be a legal determination. Not a legal settlement where we don't know what led to the settlement, but a legal determination and a declaration that there is an obligation on employers in a material legal way, which raises a risk for them, to provide a safe working environment. And couple that with the shift to work from home, which the ACT you were pushing hard on, Liam. Anyway, you were inviting employers to be responsible for the indoor air quality of people's homes. And given the state of a lot of our apartments, that's going to be a problematic exercise. I'd also just want to touch on what I said before. We won't get anywhere unless there's a united position, unless there's a clear and simple message. Now, I think I've probably done dozens of these conferences in the last 5 years, and there are a lot of people who are on board. But the message is slowly shifting. And we're getting all sorts of other issues thrown on the table, and in many cases, that's fine. But it's an invitation to confuse decision makers. And Lydia's been doing this job on indoor air quality in all its respects for decades. Others are catching up. What really fired up the most recent phase of interest in indoor air quality was the pandemic. But the prospect of another pandemic, probably for the first time in all the conferences I've attended, hasn't been mentioned yet. And it's almost shifted off the agenda. And the viral load in indoor air quality, I think, is critical to selling this message to decision makers. Because yes, there'll be concerns about wood heaters and heating and gas appliances and all those things. But in the public arena, the pandemic probably represents a bigger concern to the public mind. The silicosis argument is a fantastic argument. As an architect, I've known about it for a long time, and all power to the ACTU for having made a change. But if we confuse the messages, we won't get any attention from anybody, because no one will have a track record, and we will have succumbed and entered that state of the environment report, which is sitting on the shelf, and will be on page 66, and there'll be paragraphs there, and someone will monitor it for every 5 years, and nothing will change. It's got to be a clear, united message. And I shortened my presentation by one slide. I thought I would, but my last slide was simply going to be, so where can we easily get to? And I've said right from the start, I think we can easily get to traffic light monitors in public buildings and in public transport. So you walk into a public space and there it is, red, amber, green, and people get to know about it. It's already operating in other parts of the world based on CO2 input, can be dynamic, which I think is important. And if we get the public used to it and it's low cost, then they get a message, oh, I'm not going in there. And if they're on a tram or a train or a bus and they look up and it's red, well, am I going to stay on the bus or am I going to get off? It's their choice. But if we start dictating to people that they've got to spend thousands in their own homes and take responsibility for this themselves, politicians will turn their back on it. That's what's happened in the issues that I've been sitting around for the last 3 years, and they've all collapsed. So if we want results, we have to have a clear, united message to which politicians and decision makers can respond easily, quickly, and I won't say cheaply, but affordably.
Can I
Many-
just add to, sorry, Lydia, just to add to Ted's point, because I think it's a really good one. I think you're absolutely right that, you know, there will come a moment where there will be a totemic shift in some sectors. I worry that in some cases, those will be the very high risk sectors, and we won't be able to translate that out across the sort of broader built environment. Like we know that, you know, it's a big risk in aged care, in childcare, and in other high risk settings. So I think you're right. You know, we will see that sort of moment. What I think we haven't done well, and silicosis is an example of it, but indeed mental health is another one, is we don't do very well with hazards we can't see and touch. And so if we see an unguarded piece of plant or equipment in a workplace that's going to chop off somebody's arm, we're very quick to address it and control the hazard. You know, working at heights, we're very good ensuring that we have, you know, good protections around fall protection, given the significant cost in terms of human lives that are lost. Arguably, if we just look at the numbers in relation to the pandemic, a far greater number of people are being exposed in the workplace to much more significant risks. And I think the problem is trying to break through that barrier. As I said, we've got duties that are set out in our Work Health and Safety Act, but we lack these prescriptive regulations about how we meet those duties. And that's where regulation sort of really helps employers, because it not just guides them to the best practice, but ensures that we've got a from a competitive point of view, a sort of safety net, a minimum standard that everybody can sort of apply to. And so, I think there is a huge opportunity with some small tweaks to our framework that can really start to drive and accelerate those changes, because, it is such an important issue, and it really struggles with that invisible hazard challenge that unless people can see and touch it, and I think the traffic light examples are a really good opportunity of how do you make it right there, front and centre for people.
Many thanks, Ted and Liam, very important comments, and I could follow on several of those aspects. One of this I was going to follow on the issue of traffic lights, and I was going to put on spot Professor Tunga Zalhammer from Germany, where I first saw this many years ago, traffic lights in schools. But considering, hopefully we may have time during this symposium to talk about what happened about this traffic light. But seeing the questions on in the chat, let's look at these questions now. So the first is a question to everyone: is the role of scientists to determine what is reasonably practicable, or are we better placed to identify and quantify the issues, present potential mitigation measures, and leave others to determine what's practicable? Well, I'll respond from the point of working on this blueprint for managing standards. There were a lot of ideas on the table by experts from different areas, what should be measured, what we should propose as potential standards, a whole long list of them. But we, scientists, were able to say that it is not reasonably practicable to measure most of them, because we knew, based on our work we've done on low-cost sensors, that this wasn't possible. So we had this scientific background for this. So this was reasonably practicable probably brings experts from many different expertise to be able to say it is or it is not. So that's from my experience. Does anybody else wants to? Wendy is laughing. Do you have something to say about it?
Well, Lydia, I'd put reasonably practical up there with common sense. And Wendy earlier mentioned the 5 big questions. Now, the questions didn't raise the 5 questions she raised didn't mention the pandemic, and that's been the driver. It's what people will respond to at the moment. I think it's important to raise the right issues at the right time. But if you're seeking to impose costs on households these days, you're politically naive. So I think we have to find other ways of communicating that are in the field of common sense and the bleeding obvious. And that's why I mentioned earlier, if we get bogged down in the complexities of the science, we'll lose the public. If we get bogged down by being desperate to be in a State of the Environment report, we'll lose the decision makers. It's a craft, it's an art. You've done brilliantly well to get to the Prime Minister. He'll have to digest that, and he's got an election to face. But whoever is responsible after it, they're going to be the leaders, they're going to be the decision makers. They'll be the judges what's reasonably practicable. And if they don't get it right, it won't happen.
Thanks, Ted. We'll have Wendy, and then we have Tunga. And I think that's where we stop for the coffee break. I can see lots of questions here. We'll see how to address those questions. So, Wendy.
Just in the next session, we'll actually be looking at this question of reasonably practicable as well. So I just want to remind you that that will depend on who you are and which stakeholder group you manage. So what's practicable for a mechanical services engineer responsible for running this building will be different to me as a homeowner, will be different to what a politician thinks. So it's a perspective as well.
If I can just add to that, and I think Colin's helpfully put the guide there in the chat, so you should all grab it and read through it if you've got nothing better to do tonight than read a guide on reasonably practical. But I think there's two realms where we think about this. There's the home and there's the workplace. And fortunately, the workplace is extremely expansive. It's basically any public building which is managed by somebody else that owes a duty, I should say, not just to workers, but it owes a duty to anybody who comes into that workplace. And I think what's important is that one of the key things is it's almost like a state of knowledge. It's what the duty holder ought to have known. And so you're right, Ted, we don't want it to get bogged down in the science and technicalities of indoor air quality, but it's important that employers recognise they've got obligations around indoor air quality. And again, to sort of spruik the importance of closing some of those gaps, regulations set out that you should know these sorts of things. The final parts are actually, cost and suitability or availability of measures are factors, but they are not overwhelming factors. They shouldn't be prevailed over the health and safety of everybody in the working environment. And so I think, again, it's about sort of, building out our work health and safety framework. And I know you've got some people from Work Health and Safety Queensland there. It's really about plugging some of those very simple gaps, which we did in relation to silicosis, we did in relation to mental health, that really make it a much sharper conversation in workplaces and actually empower everybody in the workplace to start taking action, because that is the beauty of a rights-based framework, is that it enables people to collaboratively work in workplaces. Because one thing about indoor air quality is it's quite dynamic in that, in some workplaces, there are a whole range of other factors that need to be considered. And I think about sort of future pandemic preparedness as, if we can build this system out in our work health and safety framework and in our workplaces, actually, we put ourselves, and indeed I think we put politicians, in a much better place for the next pandemic. If we don't close these gaps, then we will be forced into a situation when the next pandemic arises where politicians will be having to grapple with, well, what stay-at-home orders are we going to deal with? What mask mandates are we going to have to deal with? If we address ventilation in the workplace, one, we won't be having the sort of long drawn-out debates necessarily about work from home like we have over the last few years, because we'll address better air quality in the workplace. But also, we won't have this issue around all of the other public health orders that we had to grapple with, because we built a dynamic risk-based approach in workplaces as well, which, as I said, cover a whole range of buildings, including all of our public buildings.
Thank you very much, Liam. Now there are fantastic comments and questions on that, but we'll put the voice to Tunga, and then we'll have a break.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia.
Maybe you introduce yourself, because
I'm Tunga Saltamer. I'm from Germany. So I also work in the field of indoor air quality, and I'm deeply, let's say, involved in science, but also I work for the German government. And I can add some short comments from the German perspective. I'm not sure how it works here in Australia, but I feel that in Germany we have enough scientific knowledge available. And the biggest problem we have, and I think it's also a problem here, how is this knowledge transferred? This is, let me give you a very short example. Let's say I worked on a heat action plan developed by the WHO. And this goes to the federal level in Germany, to the Federal Environment Agency, and then this is adapted. That works. Then we have a document ready for Germany. Perfect. Then we have 16 states in Germany, and then this document is transferred to these 16 states. That works, because many of these people work in the governmental committees. And now the problem starts. We have in Germany, we have 84 million people. We have 400 levels we have 400 municipal levels, administrative districts, and the decisions are made on this level. And this does not work. because all the buildings, all the evacuation plans in case of heat wave are made on this level, and these people have to inform the fire brigade, the police, and so on and so on. So we have many documents in Germany on a governmental level, but the people who make the decisions have no idea that this document exists. And this is one of our bigger problems, and maybe it's interesting for Australia too.
Well, I'm sure there are people who answer these questions here, and while Australia is not as big as Germany, but similar problems exist here.
Lydia, can I make just one
Yes,
quick
please.
further comment?
Yes?
I said at previous conferences, I failed with the previous government, previous federal government. I pushed them very hard during COVID to go down the ventilation track as an adjunct, but I also pushed them in particular to look closely at the US school solution, the Causey Rosenthal box. And those who are familiar with it, two scientists who got very practical, created something that school kids could build themselves, understand, build it in the classroom, locate it in the classroom, and in the process, teach a generation. Now, where it was rolled out and still being rolled out, it's cheap, it's practical, it involved children, it educated them, they got behind it, it became a viral thing in terms of social media. They're the sort of clever solutions that we need to get the community on board. Papers, reports, and regulations are always hard. Dictates are even harder. But practical solutions which engage people. I mean, anybody who walks into a pub and it's full of smoke and full of viral loads knows instantly. Anyone who gets on an old tram in Melbourne knows instantly. The new ones are pretty good. But we need to have the community on board. That's why I say simple, clear messages, clever strategies, not putting a load on the decision makers, but giving them solutions that they can implement. That's the way to go.
Thanks, Ted. If I could be a devil's advocate here, during the conference in Sydney, the ACTU conference, there was a person from education, I don't remember her name, and we had a conversation, maybe Liam was part of that conversation, where I strongly argued that there should be something small in the curriculum about air quality and some little example how to do it. And I got a very strong response to this. Do you remember, Liam, what the response was?
I don't, sorry.
I think there was some criticism of the Victorian government having rolled out purifiers.
No. The response was the curriculum is full. And we experienced this in Queensland with the project on low-cost sensors. We put all the efforts to make this engaged to this, but the curriculum is full and the teachers don't have time for this. I may be completely wrong with this, and Greg may have a different view, but doing this, it's a great idea, but my personal experience showed that it doesn't quite always work because of other issues. But I completely agree, we all agree with you that we have to look at many different alternatives, what to do. Now, we are now well into our coffee break, and I can see all these amazing comments. So we'll continue on this, but for now, I suggest all of us here and online will have a coffee break and we'll come back here at 11:30. Thank you.
Thank you.